Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devam saraswatim vyasam tato jayodira nashtaprayashu badresu nityam bhagavata sevya bhagavati uttama shoki bhaktir bhavati naistaki Igamal kalparur garitam param shukamakaram rita javisamitam pibata bhagatam rasamaryam mahora hora shikupu vivakaham Krishna swadama bhagate dhamagvini karunashta dushamasha parana kodunoditam Tramapiyadabhishuddha Pishuddham Vibhosam Apirana Vidambidiksaram Prakyahidaho Maranam Sankleshanirvanam Santi Nanyataham Om Agyanati Marandasyanganangana Sarakya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tajmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupakaramayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamaram Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Sri Rupam Sagaditam Sahaganathaganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Larita Shivishikan Vitam Stam Namaum Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Shrimati Bhakti Parata Swami Tanam Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nirvishes Sanivari Praskata Desara Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thanks very much to Ram Kishore, Sanjay Sharma, Jean Eskelson for joining us on this Motivational Monday. How was everybody's last week? We had a wonderful Shivaratri festival on Thursday night in Salt Lake City. I think 35 people showed up. Abhishek ceremony, talk, lots of kirtan. And then last night we talked about how the Lord is obliged to his devotees and how the Lord and only the Lord can offer protection. And I noticed also, based on what our notes are for today, there's going to be some spillover on this issue of the protection of the Lord, the Lord's being our well-wishing friend. And that's why we've called this talk on Motivational Monday, The Fallible Soldiers. And we're asking the question, who is actually willing and capable of offering us protection? So the verse, and we're going into our third week now with this same verse, which are same two verses, 17th and 18th verse. Good morning, Rakesh, Ram Kishore, Sanjay again, Jane. We are on the 17th and 18th verses of the fourth chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Once again, for the seventh consecutive time. Bodhikanam chababinam shakti hrasam chatatkritam ashararanam nasatam durmedam reshayatu shaham durgavam chajanam bhiksha munir divyena chakshusha sarvavarna shamanenam yad dadyo hitam amogadvik. The great sage, who was fully equipped in knowledge, this is Vyasadeva, could see through his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of the age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to lack of goodness. Thus, he contemplated for the welfare of men in all statuses of life. Good morning, Govinda Dev. Govinda Dev has been more than normally busy lately because he has a trial coming up, I think this week. So thanks very much for taking the time to squeeze us into your schedule, shoehorn us into your schedule. We ended last Wednesday by noting the nature of the spiritual world. Everything is harmonious. Living beings live together without antipathy, without being inimical to one another. Even in the Bible said the lion lies down and eats straw with the ox. The particular verse in the 10th canto, 13th chapter is Yata Nasharga Durira Sahasra Nimagara Mitrani Javita Pashadruturishtar Vrindavan, the transcendental abode of Lord Krishna in the spiritual world, as well as its replica in the material world at the time he descended, is the transcendental abode of the Lord. There is no hunger, there is no thirst, and though naturally inimical in the material world, in the spiritual world, both human beings and fierce animals live together there in transcendental friendship. The spiritual world is that world which is dictated to by the spirit, not the intellect, not the mind, not the working senses. It is on the level of spirit to which we must elevate ourselves by associating with spiritually surcharged souls and receiving knowledge from them through this civic succession by the descending process. In the 42nd verse of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, Indriyani parani ahora, Indriye brahmanahash, manasastu parambuddha, yo buddha paratashtusha. There's a hierarchy. The bottom rung of that hierarchy are the senses, which we have in common with the animals, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling, hearing. In fact, the animals are more acute in terms of sensory perception, generally speaking, than we are. If you stack the human being from a sensory point of view up against the animals, the human beings are lacking. The human beings are less than. So it is not in the area of sense perception that we excel. Okay. Now, above the senses is mind. Now, we're not exclusively possessors of mind either. The animals have minds. As far as eating, sleeping, mating, defending, the animals are extremely clever, maybe even again, more so than we are about how to eat, sleep, mate, and defend. So we shouldn't bank on our mind as an indication of superiority towards the animals. Of course, we eat elaborately, we mate with all kinds of nuances, we defend with nuclear weapons, and we sleep on water beds and specially organized mattresses. And so in that sense, we're more advanced than the animals, but our mind, the mind of such a materialistic person, really is no better than an animal. It's just that of a polished animal. And when one becomes too much predicated towards the comforts for the senses, following being dictated to by the mind, then one becomes disqualified for understanding the subtle, sublime message of devotional service. It said, who would neglect to hear the transcendental glories of a Lord, save and accept that Dvipada Pasu, that two-legged animal? So if our emphasis and our ambitions are to live more comfortably than the animals in terms of eating, sleeping, mating, defending, then we can't claim superiority. Now, the mind is higher than the senses. Now, higher than the mind is the intelligence. But if the intelligence, again, is leashed to the senses, in other words, if you're on a chariot and you have 5 horses, which represent the senses, you have the reins, which represent the mind, and the intelligence is the driver. But if the intelligence is not exercising control over the reins, the horses just run wild. So similarly, the intelligence has to be guided by a yet higher faculty, which is the soul. The soul is the passenger on the chariot, and it's the duty of the soul to be in charge. The intelligence shouldn't be in charge. The mind shouldn't be in charge. The senses shouldn't be in charge. But the soul, the passenger, should tell the driver how to manipulate the reins and control the horses in such a way as to go somewhere where they'll get good benefit, good profit. If the passenger / soul opts out of its role of control, the result is the whole kit and caboodle goes over a cliff. And one should not be out of control, one should be in control. Sometimes the Hare Krishnas are accused of mind control. Yeah, that's exactly right. We try to control our own minds. We as spirit souls try to control the intelligence, which then controls the mind, which then controls the senses, which is exactly the formula for happy, profitable, uplifting life. It is society in general who opens itself up to all the influences of advertising and incentivizing based on a consumeristic society. So yes, one way or another, your mind is going to be controlled. So we practice the devotional disciplines so that the mind will be controlled by the soul. The mind will be controlled by the intelligence, and the intelligence will be controlled by the soul. Otherwise, if you just if you don't cultivate, if you're not proactive in cultivating some sort of discipline to make the soul strong, to nourish the soul, and make the soul dominate, then you're going to be dominated by the bottom rung of the ladder, the senses, and you're going to be no better than an animal, instead of being dominated by the topmost rung, which is the spirit soul. Krishna says something similar just early in the Bhagavad Gita, text number 40. Indriyani mano buhir adhyanastanam uchate eta vimat yaramavitamasha. What's the problem with being dictated to by the senses or the mind and the intelligence? Here's the answer. Here's the answer. It says the senses, the mind, and the intelligence, what's the difficulty there? Are the sitting places of lust. Avaritam jnanamanana nitya, one's natural best interests are covered and impeded by something, excuse me, some kind of a weird noise coming out here. Okay, so where are we? They're impeded by something that is insidiously inserted itself or permeated itself into our mind and senses and intelligence, and that is lust. That is the feverish, unreasonable attraction that the conditioned soul has for savoring, for ruminating, for chewing the chewed, enjoying on a material level, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So this lust, avritam jnanamena nityano yanino nityabharino kama rupena dushpadayana nacha. It is a contamination, it is a dirt, it is a covering which rests, which is seated in the mind, the senses, and the intelligence. And we have to overcome that. Kamesha, krodesha. Why do we have to overcome it? Because that kama, that lust, can never be satisfied. It's like a fire. And when you cater to the whims of the senses, the cravings of the senses, and give in to the desire of the nose to smell beautiful fragrance, the ears to hear beautiful music, the tongue to taste gourmet food, and the eyes to see the beautiful forms of the opposite sex, when you live for that, then the result is you're just pouring gasoline on the fire. You're hoping to put the fire out by pouring gasoline on the fire. And what's going to be the end result? Kamesha, krodesha. You're going to get angry. You're going to get ticked off. You're going to live agitated and frustrated. Because the harder you try to satisfy that lust, the more it blazes up, gets stronger and stronger. There's a story. Akbar asked one of his ministers, how long does lust last? And the minister said, unless you exercise discipline, unless you stop feeding the cravings of the senses, it'll just get worse and worse. And Akbar says, well, that surely can't be it in old age. Surely we grow out of it when the body gets old and disabled and the senses grow no longer capable of attaining or even enjoying or savoring to the degree that they used to. The minister didn't say anything at that point in time, but a couple of days later, the minister said to Akbar, would you like me to show you what the answer to your question of a few days ago was? Akbar said, what was the question again? You proposed that in old age, when the senses are weakened, that lust also will have gone away, taken its leave. And yes, Akbar said, okay, so show me how that is untrue. The minister took Akbar through the old part of Delhi. They came to a doorway whereby the markings on the doorway indicated that inside was an old man who was virtually in his death throes. So the minister said, we're going to go into the room, the back room of this 90-plus-year-old man, who's literally going to die within the next few minutes. And the minister had already told Akbar to bring his beautiful 16-year-old daughter with him. So the three of them, the minister, Akbar's 16-year-old daughter, 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate, like a junior high school cheerleader, and then Akbar, the king of the world, who was powerful. He projected imperial sovereignty. He had all the trappings of royalty. So the minister said, you and your daughter go through the door side by side, and then just see to who the man's eyes go. So here's an old man, like gasping, fighting for breath. Maybe he had COVID, the version of COVID or pneumonia. He was all arthritic, rheumatic, all wrinkled up. So Akbar did as the minister suggested. He went through the doorway with his 16-year-old daughter by his side. And to whom should the old man's eyes go? They barely noticed Akbar, the king of the world, the most powerful man in the world, with all of the indications and evidences and trappings and the stature and presence to prove it. And the old man's eyes immediately went looking at the young girl. Then Akbar could understand that if you feed the flames of lust, if you cave to the enjoying spirit, even if your senses wane, the power of your senses wane in old age, you have gotten yourself into a very, very destructive habit of following the path of least resistance, of giving in to the senses whenever they whisper to you. So that lust then is going to carry you into another body, and not a very desirable body in the next life. What animals are most indicative, most controlled by lust in nature? Rabbits, deer, mice. They procreate prolifically. So that's one's mentality. Whatever one's mentality is at the time of death, that will carry one to another body after this life. And so the future of people who have no discipline, no hedge against the appetites and cravings of the senses, their future is not very, very bright. And going on here in the Bhagavad Gita with this same train of thought, in the 43rd verse of the 3rd chapter, Krishna says, Evam buddhi param buddha samstabhyapana jahi sakram mahabaho yeyam dayate jagat. Thus, here's the clarion call. Here's the rallying cry of the Supreme Lord speaking to each and every one of us. Evam buddhi param buddha. Thus, knowing oneself. And if you didn't know, you know now because we just said it. Okay? We don't have an excuse. From this moment on, moving forward, if you just happen across this broadcast, this discussion, you're going to wish you hadn't, because your sense gratification is never going to be the same again. There's a higher call, and that is the Lord is saying to Arjuna, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna. In other words, Krishna is saying, you can do this, Arjuna. And through Arjuna, he's saying to each and every one of us that he has equipped us to exercise discipline, self-control, and be the masters of our senses, and not the other way around. Krishna says, one should steady the mind by deliberate Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. And what's our workout? What's our program for strengthening the soul so that it can take control of the senses? It is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We'll pause there. We're joined by Bhakti Gary, who made a nice comment that Maya is very strong. George Pratt says the driver can't be asleep at the wheel or he'll get out of control and crash. And that's what we're talking about, is awakening and empowering the driver, which is the soul. Lakshmi, you jumped in here a few minutes ago. Did you catch the drift of what we're talking about here, this motivational Monday morning?
Oh yeah. I was thinking that's what Patanjali says, in his second sutra, I think. Yogas chitta britti nirodha. Yoga is calming the mind, stilling the mind, controlling the mind. Without that, you're not practicing yoga. You're practicing, calisthenics or something like that. and the other thing, I don't know if you quoted the verse. It's one of probably two of my favorite verses in the Gita. Dhyayato visayam pumsa sangastishu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama krodha vijayate krodha bhavati sangmohat smriti vibramad smriti bramshad buddhi nasho buddhi nasha pranashati. That's like, my favorite verse practically, because Krishna gives such a perfect breakdown of what happens in our fall down, losing control. You contemplate the objects of the senses. From that contemplation, then you become attached to what you're contemplating. And if it's the objects of the senses, you become attached to that. And if you become attached, then you develop lust, increased desire. You have that increased lust, desire, then it leads you into anger, and anger, the whole process, bewilderment, from bewilderment, loss of intelligence, memory, and then. So those are the thoughts that immediately sparked when I heard where you were going.
America's known for a place of freedom. We have more so-called freedom of choices in America than any other country in the world. But we need to look a little closer at that, because the way that Maya restricts our freedom is to give us choices in a limited framework. So if your choices are only which sense you're going to indulge, then you're not free. You're controlled by the senses. But Maya, she gives us the illusion of freedom. In America, we can say, well, there's this for the nose, and this for the mouth, and this for the ears, and this for the eyes, and this for the tongue, and which one am I going to indulge today? And we think we're free, but we're actually not free at all. In fact, we're more enslaved by virtue of the multiple choices we have. In other countries where there's only 2 car manufacturers, or there's only 2 types of restaurants in town, then we're actually more free to exercise discipline, more free from the tyranny of multiple choices. The example is given, like right now, by Bobby's, she's got this old Honda Civic, and she drives back and forth from here to Salt Lake City. So I'm actually looking for something which has more safety features for her. And someone told me the Hyundais, since 2018, have incorporated a lot of safety features. They give you a warning sign in your side mirrors if someone's in your blind spot, so you can't change lanes without having a warning there. There's radar that you cannot get within 2 car lengths of the car in front of you. If you have on cruise control, or you don't notice that someone has slammed on the brakes in front of you, your car will automatically stop. It's got cameras so you can back up. I rented a Hyundai last year to go somewhere, and I was amazed. It's almost like a self-driving car. It's very hard to get in an accident. And so I went to the Hyundai dealers to look for something for Bobby, and the salesman was very clever. He didn't say, "Do you want a car or not?" He said, or "Do you want a car or not?" He says, "Do you want it with the GPS screen and the dashboard, or without? Do you want it with or without the leather seats?" So he wasn't asking me, do I want a car or not? He wasn't asking me, do I want to spend this money on a car, or do I not want to spend the money? But he was asking me, do you want a car with these features, or do you want a car with those features? So it's a very, very good sales technique. And Maya is totally aware of the sales technique. We get to ask ourselves in America, more than in any other country of the world, how much do I want to indulge my tongue today? And we have the freedom, as well as the money, the buying power, to do it to an extraordinary degree, a degree that's never before been possible in the history of the world. Similarly for the hearing, CDs, digital music, Spotify, you name it. For the vision, beautiful forms, uh, beautiful path. But the point is, our choices are within the narrow confines of sense gratification, which at the end of the day means that if we give into that, if we buy into that, we are no better than animals, unfortunately. So Krishna gives the clarion call to realize there's a hierarchy. Senses, above the senses is the mind, above the mind is the intelligence, but in the mind, the senses, the intelligence, lust resides. So unless and until you come to the level of soul, and unless you empower and strengthen the soul, you will not be at all free. It's like being in the prison house. What do you want? Do you want to eat a peanut butter sandwich or do you want cheese with wilted lettuce? You have a choice, but you're in the prison house. So we have to recognize that our so-called freedom of choice for sense gratification is totally illusory. It doesn't lead to higher life, but it leads to a slippery slope, ultimately into taking birth in the subhuman species of life. Am I wrong? Or is Krishna wrong? Better question to ask. Now,
Yeah. You
yeah,
know, they have those apps where you take a picture and then it projects into the future what that person will look like. That's how we have to train our mind, because the material world is ever deteriorating. Every single sense object, whether it's a new car, a young woman, a young man, a new house, every single sense object is deteriorating. And all we have to think of is like that app. Am I going to invest my time and energy in that which is going to go bankrupt? Or am I going to invest my time and energy in the eternal?
yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yoni evacha adiantavanta nate shuramate. Krishna says, don't invest your time in that which has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you look at me and Lakshmi, we're both septuagenarians. I'm
That's
I'm
right.
a little bit further into it than you are. You just barely became a septuagenarian. I've been
Yep.
a septuagenarian for 4.5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, look closely. This is the end. Okay. Do you want to reach this point in life, sold out, bound hand and foot to sense gratification? As a 75-year-old man, do you want to still be going to Chakarama and feeding your face, watching your cholesterol, blood pressure? Do you want to, as a 75-year-old man, be rubbernecking on the street for the teenagers in miniskirts? Do you want to reach that degraded position? I don't think so. So, therefore, now while you're young, and most of our listeners are younger than us by a significant margin, our encouragement is take it from us, the older generation, your potential mentors, the sages, so to speak. Now, while you have willpower, while you have the strength of the senses, don't wait. Don't delay. The senses will never give you a break, they'll never give you respite. Don't continue to pour gasoline on the fire. Chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Read the knowledge of Krishna about how to become free from the Bhagavad Gita. Eat only food which has been offered to Krishna. And most importantly, the most important thing of all is associate with devotees of the Lord. Because when you associate with devotees of the Lord, you can't be out of control. You will be controlled. You will be keen on the uplifting topics of spiritual life. You'll be keen on kirtan. You'll be keen on prasadam. You'll be keen on devotional service. And it all comes about in the association of devotees. If you hang out in the hospital world, you're going to catch whatever those people have. If you hang out with devotees, you're going to catch enthusiasm. for self-control, discipline, and the higher life. It's guaranteed. Satsange Tyage Vaishnava. We're coming up on Gaur Purnima in a couple of weeks. We're celebrating the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya. And if you haven't done so already, there are so many wonderful programs out there on YouTube and Zoom leading up to Lord Chaitanya's appearance day, which is on the 28th Sunday of this month. If you like, you can go to GBC SPT, either YouTube or Facebook, and there are every single detail of Chaitanya's life, Chaitanya Charitamrita, is put under the microscope. And Lord Chaitanya's primary instruction to his aspiring disciples was to give up the association of sense gratifiers. Don't hang out with people who are guided by the senses, by the mind, or the lust-riddled intelligence, but choose for your associates those who are on the spiritual path. This is key. Jnani prayasham udapasya namanti jivanti sanmakaritam jam. He gave this same advice to none other than Lord Brahma, the creator of the universe. He said, remain where you are. Don't make any abrupt changes, but start changing your consciousness by choosing, for those in your inner circle, devotees of the Lord. And even if you don't have those personalities in your workplace or in your home, they're available through Zoom, through Facebook, now more than ever before. And so I consider that with all that's out there, with all the great devotees and all the great seminars and all the great workshops, if someone doesn't take advantage of it, which is it's more available now than ever during COVID, I just feel like, what a loss, what a tragedy. And speaking of tragedy, we come back to Puranjana. We pick up where we left off last week with the story of Puranjana. He's an allegorical person. He's a technique that Narada Muni uses when he's trying to make these same points to King Prithnabarisha. Talks about this allegorical person named Puranjana. Puranjana is totally attached to his wife. He's totally attached to sense gratification. He's been out hunting for a long period of time, comes back to the palace. His palace, his city of 9 gates, is attacked by Chandravega, the forces of time and old age. His city is set in fire by Prabraja, that fever which overcomes one at the time of death. And Puranjana, far from being consoled, far from being cool and calm, as those who exercise sense control are generally, he's extremely distressed, and his thoughts at the time of death are not of the Lord, are not of transcendence, not of transcending to the peaceful, harmonious, eternal, blissful, spiritual world, but his thoughts, just like any cat or dog or baboon or any mammal or fish, are on his family members. Katam nu duraka dinir dwakaravara batishante mayakare suryasam samupashyate. The thoughts at King Puranjana's mind at the time of death are of his children and of his wife. He's terrified. And he's already been invalid for a long time. It's been a long time since he's been able to do anything tangibly to support his wife and children. In fact, his wife or children are saying, this guy is a liability. The sooner he kicks off, the better. The sooner we can inherit our property, sooner we won't have to waste our time taking care of this old guy. It says the farmer no longer feeds the old ox good food. Once the ox is too old to do the heavy work of plowing the field, the farmer more or less neglects the old ox. So it's been a while since anybody really cared about Puranjana other than to wish that he would kick off. I heard a story about a man, he went to a doctor about being hard of hearing. And the doctor fitted him with these hearing aids, which were indetectable. Once they were installed, nobody could tell that he had the hearing aids. And so after a month or so, he came back for a checkup, and the doctor said, "How are the hearing aids working?" And the old man said, "Oh, I can hear everything, even 10, 20 feet away." And the old man said, "How is that affecting your family life, your relationship with your children and your wife?" He said, "Oh, yeah, very, very profoundly. I've changed my will 4 times after hearing what they're saying about me." So it's so ironic that that the family members, they really can't wait for him to kick off, and yet he's still in that mindset that he's providing for them, and he's thinking, how would they maintain myself in my absence? And the answer is much better, much better. Prabhupada said, the family members come, "Can I have $100 for this? Can I have $1,000 for this? Can you pay for my wedding? Can you sponsor me for this seminar? Can you send me on a vacation to Cancun?" They're literally robbing the head of the family. They're literally picking his pockets. And he's saying, "Oh, this is love. They love me so much. They're so fond of me." We see Puranjana typifying this illusion of the person who reaches their end of their life, not having cultivated detachment, distance from the family member who on one level or another are just basically pickpockets. And Prabhupada says this. This is the 10th verse in the 27th chapter of the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the verse says, this isn't Prabhupada, this is Vyasadeva, who foresaw the coming age of sense gratification. Kali Yuga. Vyasadeva says, these, or Narada Muni, Vyasadeva is quoting Narada Muni, "These sons and grandsons of Puranjana were virtually," read my lips, what is the word that scripture uses? Plunderers of King Puranjana's riches, including his home, treasury, servants, secretaries, and all other paraphernalia. Puranjana's attachment for these things was very deep rooted. And in the time that Puranjana lived, according, presumably past history, when people had more virility and a longer lifespan, it's explained in this 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that Puranjana, through his wife, Puranjani, had 1,100 sons and 110 daughters. He must have been so happy. What materialist doesn't want to have lots of children? And they all want more sons than daughters, because the sons go out and propagate, spread the name and fame of the dynasty. Man wants his name to be carried on. So generally they're a little more enthusiastic about sons because their name will continue on generation after generation. So it seems like Puranjana nailed it. He was favored by the Lord. He had the ideal family circumstances. He loved his wife. There was no tension or domestic cacophony in the home. He had, 1,210 offspring, of which 9 out of 10 were sons. What more could you want? And yet he comes to the end of his life, and it's just pathetic. Going to the next verse, the 11th verse in the 27th chapter, the great sage Narada continued, "My dear King Prachinabhara said, like you, Puranjana is a reflection of Prachinabhara himself, King Puranjana also became implicated in so many desires. Thus he worshipped demigods, forefathers, and social leaders with various sacrifices, which were all very ghastly because they were inspired by the desire to kill animals." Comments, Lakshmi?
Yeah, I was just while you were talking about old age and the effects, and did you ever hear the story of the young man who was worshiping Yamaraj, and he worshipped Yamaraj, and Yamaraj finally gave him darshan, and Yamaraj said, "Well, what is it that you are asking for? Because you are doing this worship to me." And we do worship to the demigods to get some kind of material benediction. So the young man said, I want to know ahead of time when I'm going to die. I don't want to be surprised, because death comes at any moment. I don't want to be surprised. So Yamaraj said, so be it. So the man was like in his 20s. He reaches his 30s. Of course, he gets no warning. He reaches his 40s. He gets no warning. Reaches his 50s. No, now he's getting hopeful. No warning. 60s, no warning. Then he gets into our bracket. He gets into his 70s, and no warning. And then one day, all of a sudden, Yamaraj shows up, and he said, "Okay, it's time to go." And the man said, wait a minute. He said, we had a deal here when I was doing the puja, and we had a deal. And he said, you were supposed to give me warnings. And Yamaraj says, what do you mean warning? He said, when you hit your 30s, I gave you warning. You started getting little gray hairs. He said, when you hit your 40s, I gave you warning. You started getting wrinkles in your eyes. He said, when you hit your 50s, your eyesight, you got weak. You couldn't read anymore. You had to get glasses. When you were 60, you lost most of your hair. And then when you were 70s, you could barely, you can't run very fast because you get really tired. He said, I gave you every single decade of your life, I was giving you warnings. So here you are. This is the inevitable, hard, cold fact. I've been giving you warnings all along. You've just been ignoring them.
While you get your madanga, now you've just led us into tomorrow's opening statement. Deha patra kadatadushu atmasenyushu tesham pramata nidanam apsana pina pashati. Said materialistic people who have opted out for sense gratification are counting on fallible soldiers like the wife and the sons and the grandsons and the brothers-in-law and the sisters-in-law to protect them at the time of death. They are pramataha, they are madmen, they are crazy because they do not see their inevitable destruction. My grandfather has died, my father has died, my uncle has died, I'm getting wrinkles, I'm getting aches and pains, the yellow, and still they are called pramata, crazy madmen, because they do not see what is completely obvious. No one can protest that God didn't give them warning. He warns us every day through our physical deterioration. He warns us when children and wives lose interest in us any longer because we're no longer able to pay the bills. He warns us through scriptures. He warns us through saintly persons. He warns us through Lakshmi Nrsimha. He warns us through Caru. So you're all on notice. You're warned. So chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Take prasadam, take consecrated food offered to the Lord. Never miss an opportunity for kirtan. Chant japa regularly every morning. And most important, seek the association of devotees of the Lord. That is our antidote. That is the program. That is the workout program, a fitness program for strengthening the soul and having the soul take over the mind, the senses, and the intelligence for the ultimate benefit of the living being. Om Tat Sat. So I trust now nobody will have any objections to a wonderful, beautiful, Gandharva-like kirtan by our one and only Lakshmi Nrsimha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Lakshmi,
Yes,
I'd love to see your 70-year-old face more clearly. Is there a light you can turn on in the room?
I'm outside.
Oh, okay. You're kind of in the shadows, but anyway.
Yeah, I have to arrange something. We decided it was so nice outside to give people a little treat. Have Tulsi here and here and here, and palm trees and everything. Next time I'll try to work something where there's a light.
We want to see every wrinkle. See what
Yeah.
what we have in our future. Not me, but our listeners. Let them see. Uh, previews of coming attractions.
Yeah, they could see the gravity working on the face. Pulling. Ah, I'm melting. Help me. I'm melting.
Let us see it in all of its gruesomeness.
Yeah, I always
No, but
laugh when
truthfully, I mean, you look very, very. I mean, devotees don't look their age. You know, they look decades younger than their age. But still, what is inevitable for others is no less so for devotees.
yeah, people say that, you look good for your age. What does that mean? I look good for my age. A pomegranate may look good, but it could be rotten on the inside. So what does that mean? Like sometimes we get avocados here, local avocados, and they look great. And then you cut them open and it's all got black
I've
spots and
wasted
rot.
I've wasted more money on avocados than any other food stuff.
Exactly.
Avocados
Exactly.
have just been over and over again such a big disappointment for me.
Yeah, they're so deceptive. They look great. And that's the body. That's the nature of the body. They look
Especially
great maybe on the outside.
Especially Costco, they have a bag of six
Yes.
avocados. They have it at a great price. You might,
Yes.
but they're all rotten inside.
Yeah. And how many people take them back? Nobody takes them back. So we'll use Ektar
Yeah,
today.
we should do that. We should take the avocados back to the customer service and desk and say, "Look what you sold me. I want a refund."
Well, if my wife was shopping, she would do that. She definitely doesn't let them slide with giving rotten and making us pay for it. It's already way too expensive. Because here in Puerto Rico, they have a thing called the Jones Act. When the United States took over Puerto Rico, they imposed this Jones Act, which means that everything that comes to Puerto Rico has to go to the United States first. So that raises the shipping cost tremendously because, if you're buying something from Dominican Republic, which is only 200 miles away, it first has to go somewhere in the United States, Florida or New York, and then has to come back on a U.S. ship. So that's why I mean, otherwise things would be so very cheap here, but they have their ways to cheat.
Wow. Now I'm not so eager to move to Puerto Rico.
Right. Yep. Everywhere there's the threefold miseries and various permutations. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, oh, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Gaura Premanandi.
Hari Bo. That was, oh my gosh. Folks, if you're out there on Facebook, put your hands together for Lakshmi Shrina. How lucky we are to have him wrapping everything up. That reminded me of like springtime, kick back, long lazy river, Krishna on my mind. That was like so wonderful and so full of hope. We do feel like we're on the cusp of a breakthrough now after a year of lockdown. Things are going to open up. We might have live events again, live kirtans. That kirtan just sort of symbolized everything that we're excited about right now at this point in time. And talk about new things, talk about breaking ground. We have a lot of new people that we haven't seen before who have joined and liked. Of course, we have our old friends, our steady attendees like Rakesh Raghava and Bhai Bobby, Govinda Dev, Bhakti Gary, Sundari Priya, but we also have Thomas Wayne. I have to think who Thomas Wayne is. I must know him by his spiritual name because we have 251 mutual friends. So I must know Thomas Wayne. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us. Sumaduri Nanda Sutadas, name that we haven't seen before. Thank you so much. And Richie Franklin, Richie! Haribo! Richie plays Dasarath every year in our Ramayana. Of course, we didn't have it last year. We may not have it this year because we moved the Festival of Colors to the spring, and that conflicts with when we usually have the Festival of India. But Richie Franklin's one of my favorite people in Utah. What a wonderful, warm, talented, funny guy. He makes everybody hold their sides with belly laughs when he plays the role of Ravana in our annual festival of India Ramaya. So Richie, love you, man. Thanks for joining us. Raleigh, thank you, Raleigh. Raleigh and Indu graced the Utah Yatra last month, brought it to a new level. So happy. Sundari Priya. Sabita Rotre, I haven't seen that name except maybe once or twice before. Thank you. Arpit Singh Sisodia, another infrequent visitor. Sanjay Sharma, thank you, Sanjay, a good friend. Ram Kishore, thank you, Ram Kishore. Rupa Manjari, as steady as anyone has ever been. And one new name, Saha Lakshman, and then another rock steady attendee is Jean Eskelson. Comments I can read by Raquel from Manteca, California. Thank you so much. Hari Krishna. Rakesh says, Lakshmi Prabhu, I really like your ek tata musical instrument you're using today. There's from Rakesh. Rupa Manjari has given you applause emojis. Oh, thank you. And of course, Rob, as always, is here next to us. Rob makes up our third member here on Zoom. So thank you, Rod. I know you're going through some tough times, but I hope that some of our discussions are bringing some light at the end of the tunnel. We generally hope that you get solace and consolation and closure from some of the things that are disturbing you. But again, it's all a test. We're all about trying to control the mind, experience a higher taste. And when you experience a higher taste of shelter at Krishna's lotus feet, then the problems just don't seem as serious as they used to. That's our hope for Rob Prabhu. All right, that's it. Tomorrow, come back. It's a cliffhanger. We've spent 7 days discussing Paranjana, and tomorrow we're going to talk about what happens to Paranjana, the sense enjoyer, the person who's attached to his children, his grandchildren, and most of all his wife. What is going to be his situation after leaving his current city of 9 gates? Tune in tomorrow to find the answer. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare